This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers. And first off, I just want to apologize for the lack of videos over the last few days. I don't know if what I had is coming back with a vengeance, or if this is just the worst before it gets better, but I've not been feeling well the last few days. Still have a lot of pressure in my head. I actually sound really loud to myself right now. But this is a movie that I've watched over the last couple nights. It is another TV movie, which, if you follow my channel, you know that these made-for-TV movies are some of the best that you can find when it comes to real-life serial killers. Both in quality of film, but also accuracy. This is one that I did not know about. This is one that I saw on a playlist on YouTube for real-life killer films. And for some reason, I thought it was a cut version. A few of those films are cut by like a significant amount. But I saw that the store that I go to could get it, so I actually ordered a small handful of films, so more will be coming in. I got all my Christmas shopping done, so I was able to pick up a couple more. And I'm really glad I picked this one up because this is a really good film of a really notorious case, especially over in Britain. Probably the most fascinating case for me as far as the killer couples go. You know, I've done Carla, which is based on Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. I'm pretty sure there's a film about Fred and Rosemary West, Ray and Faye Copeland. I mean, there's a bunch of killer couples, but I think Badlands, which is about Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. But I think this is probably the most notorious or heinous of the killer couples. It is the 2006 TV film See No Evil, The Story of the Moores Murders, which, not quite sure why only Myra is on the cover. On the original cover, they're both on it. But, yeah, it's the story of the Moores Murders, which, for those that don't know, between 1963 and 65, 5 children between the ages of 10 and 17 were killed at the hands of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. I don't think they were ever married. I don't remember that. But they would abduct these children. Myra would help. And then they would drive to the Saddleworth Moors. Brady would take them down. He'd do his thing. You know, I think they were all found to be sexually assaulted, tortured, strangled, and then buried on the moors. And this film was about that. And it doesn't get too graphic. In fact, you only see one murder, and that's the murder that will eventually be their downfall, which is the 5th murder. Because they try to bring Myra's brother-in-law, Dave Smith, into it, and it's witnessing this murder that he goes to the police. Now, I know some people have an issue with that. You know, as I've said before, surface level true crime fans, they just want to see the killers do their thing. That scene is very effective, but the performances by Maxine Peake and Sean Harris are very eerie. They're very well done. The film is basically a detective procedural with scenes here and there of Brady and Hindley in just sort of their day-to-day life. How they hang out with her sister Maureen and her young husband Dave, and how Ian tries to pull Dave into his world. That's basically the film. It is in 2 parts, and I don't think there was a play all option. I think you had to select each part, which is a 2-part film. Not quite 3 hours, 140 minutes, 2 hours, 10 minutes. So it wasn't cut. For some reason I thought it was when I saw it on YouTube. Their performances are definitely eerie. We only see the one murder, but it's a very accurate film, and it's very well acted. I mean, the British are very good actors. So, 2-part British television serial. It was directed by Christopher Medall, if I pronounced that correctly. produced by Granada Television. It aired on ITV on May 14th and 15th, 2006, which puts it almost 40 years to the day of the beginning of Brady and Hindley's trial. They went on trial May 19th. No, it was April 19th, excuse me. But still, close to the 40th anniversary of their trial. It does have a lot more. It's kind of told through the eyes of Maureen and Dave, but also the lead investigator, Joe Mounsey, I think his name was. Which I think he's based on a few different officers, which I'll get to. But yeah, stars Maxine Peake as Myra Hindley, Sean Harris as Ian Brady, which he looked really familiar. He was in the film Prometheus, a couple of the Mission Impossibles. Possum, that's where I saw him. He's the lead in Possum, which if you haven't seen Possum, excellent psychological art house horror film. I have reviewed it. It's phenomenal. So that's where I recognize him from. But I know I've seen him in other things. A film called Asylum, Brighton Rock, I've heard of that. A Lonely Place to Die, Deliver Us from Evil, Green Knight, which I have not seen, but I've heard of it. Joanne Froggatt as Maureen Hindley, she looked really familiar. She was also in nothing I've seen, except for, unless this Mary Shelley film is the one I'm thinking of, which I don't think it is. Downtown Abbey, lots of TV. Excuse me. But other than that, there's also Matthew McNulty, who plays Dave Smith. And at first I thought he was Tom Riddle from Harry Potter, but it's not him. Also, George Costigan, Charlotte Emerson, and John Henshaw. John Lunn composed the score, and Lucas Strebel did cinematography. 90 minutes per episode. Part 2 was like 68 minutes, but apparently this is the first dramatization of Notorious Murderers to mark the 40th anniversary. Was produced to mark the 40th anniversary of their trial. Okay. But the first dramatization of Notorious Murderers, which I believe the same creative team also did the film Appropriate Adult, which is about Frozen Rosemary West, and one called This Is Personal, The Hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper, which I don't know if that's the one that I've seen on YouTube. There is a 3-hour Yorkshire one on YouTube. There's also a film called Peter, but I'll definitely be checking those out. I believe it's from the same creative team, or at least the same production. But this was actually made with support of the victims' families, which is kind of rare, but that did happen. And it was made with 2 years of research. And you can definitely tell. As I was watching this, there was a lot of attention to detail, even if it doesn't go anywhere. Like, at one point, there's a scene where they mention this one 13-year-old girl who they could question, who was a friend of Hindley and Brady. There was a girl that was questioned. I think she was 12. Her name was Patricia Hodges. But it pays very close attention to detail. It does jump around a lot, at least once we get to the trial. I mean, we see them get... The trial's very brief. We see them get sentenced, and then we jump to some scenes involving the aftermath. But you can definitely tell some extensive research did go into this film. I will say, Maxine Peake and Sean Harris look great as Brady and Hindley. Not just recreating their famous mugshots, but just... And I haven't seen any interviews with either one of them, but they're both very chilling. I mean, Ian Brady, he's or the character, the portrayal, he's definitely just an absolute creep who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Myra, it doesn't portray her as like a victim like say Carla does, the film Carla about Carla Homolka. It does portray her as being just as evil and just into all of this stuff as Ian is. Although it does portray her as trying to, towards the end, say that she's changed. It was all Brady's influence. But it does do a good job at that. It doesn't victimize or glorify her. It does show Brady as, especially his interrogation scenes, and just, Sean Harris is so good at having these just dead, soulless eyes and just this look. They do use real victims' photos in this film. Which a lot of times don't change victims' names out of respect for the families. But here, not only do they use the real victims' names, if there's any photos, like on newspapers or we see detectives handing each other whatever, they're real photos of the real victims. So there is a lot of detail that went into this, which I do admire. And it definitely where it doesn't glorify these two and it does show them as monsters, even without showing anything. Again, the only murder we see is that of the final victim, the 17-year-old, but everything else, like how it just shows them being evil during trial or interrogations, or just through implications. If you've read about these two, you've probably heard about the 16-minute audio recording of the torture of 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey. The recording is mentioned and found in this. Of course, they don't play it, but through implications with all of the law enforcement that like listen to it, seeing them run out of the room to like vomit or look distraught, it does a good job at implying the evil that they've done and just sort of showing where the public was. I mean, Dave Smith, he spent years with this cloud of being involved with the Moores murderers over his head, and Maureen Hindley, their house being vandalized, their kids being spat on and taunted for being related to the Hindley and Brady. It shows the aftermath of their lives and just where the public was with these child murders going on. And I believe this won Best Drama and Best Female Performer in a Drama or Comedy at the Royal Television Society, and Best Drama Serial at British Academy of Film, Television Arts, so BAFTA. It definitely deserves it. I mean, this was a very well-made movie, TV movie. Definitely one of the better ones I've seen recently, and especially when it comes to recreating things. I mean, there's even a photo, I'll put it up, a famous photo that was used during the investigation of Myra Hindley kneeling down on the moors with her dog Puppet in her arms. And, she's looking down at the ground. Law enforcement took it as she's looking at a gravesite. Turns out she was. It was the grave of John Kilbride. And they were able to use that photo to find his body. But in any case, while watching it, I could not tell if it was the actual photo or if they recreated it with this actress. And, I don't really know what to say about it other than it's just really good. I mean, all the performances are great. I'm fine with it not being centered around Brady or Hindley. If you do want to focus more on the victims and the families and the public, you kind of gotta take this route. Show it through the eyes of the investigators, Dave and Maureen, but also show like what the parents are going through in the public. I know, again, a lot of people probably have a problem with that. They just want to see serial killer films, see how disturbing it can be. I know there's other films about them. In fact, there's one I want to pick up called Longford, which is about this reverend that got close to at least Hindley. I don't know about Brady, but I know he got close with Hindley while she was in prison. And I'm not sure who plays Hindley in that, but Andy Serkis plays Ian Brady. And just by the mugshot they recreated and Andy Serkis being awesome, it's going to be a good movie. So I'll definitely check that out. But, I mean, you can definitely get the facts of the story. And to me, I always find it more disturbing if they're able to accurately get the emotions across through implications. Like, even when the first body is found and they have the tent set up and you see the coroner go in, you see the shadows, the silhouettes, like he looks down and he's walking out like gagging. That to me is more effective than actually showing the stuff on screen. And it's done in a very tasteful way. Like, you can definitely see that they made this with support from the families and for the families, while also being as historically accurate as possible. So I would definitely recommend this. If you are an actual true crime enthusiast, not like a surface level one that just scenes with the killers doing their thing, I really think that you will enjoy this. Excuse me. If you liked some of the other TV films that I've reviewed that maybe were more investigation, more detective procedural based, I think you'll really enjoy this. And the Moors Murders is a very fascinating case. I mean, it's horrific. It's horrific what these two did. I have heard the 16-minute recording, and it is rough. But I would have to say, of the killer couples, they're probably the most fascinating to read about or watch about. And I think that Phil Longford with Andy Serkis might be more about their life after the fact, like in prison. But as far as just telling the story as is, I do think there's plenty to get out of this film. Would I have asked for a bit more screen time with Peake and Harris as Brady and Hindley? Sure, but that's only because they are so mesmerizing as those two. Again, even not just seeing them commit their crimes, just them together. Or maybe just showing... I see why they didn't quite show Brady having that hold over Myra, because that probably would have victimized her. And I do think she's just as evil as Brady is. I mean, there's audio recordings of her torturing Leslie Ann Downey. There's photos of her kneeling over graves. Even then, it wasn't a case where she was under abuse or intimidation. I think she was really into it. And the film does a good job at showing that. So, I think this is a very well-made film. Definitely became one of my favorite serial killer made-for-TV movies. There are books on the Moors murders that I would love to get, because, I mean, their mugshots alone are among probably among some of those infamous. I mean, all these encyclopedias I have, they're going to be in all of them. Like, this one, it has everybody in it. But other ones I have, I mean, you'll probably find them right on the cover, like they are here. There is a chapter of the Moors Murders in World's Worst Crimes, A to Z. You have Ian Brady himself on the cover of this one. And you have Hindley and Brady on the cover of this. Those are just the ones I have with them on the covers, but they are in almost any serial killer book that you buy that has multiple ones. Surprisingly, the two books I have, Women Who Kill and Evil Women, surprisingly, Myra Hindley was not in that, even if it was just about her. But yeah, definitely. So it is uncut on YouTube. I guess I could have watched it there, but I'm glad I own it. So definitely go check it out. It is wonderfully acted. The atmosphere of it, where the crimes take place on the moors, it's very immersive in its atmosphere. You can really feel the tension of the community in this, especially after the trial, or during the trial when they've been caught, and Dave has to, every time he goes in public, people are after his throat. It's well acted. You definitely want to see where it goes, even if you know the story. But yeah, and the attention to detail is very admirable, very commendable, very good made for TV film. So I guess with that, we'll get into the sort of summary or cliff notes, and then the film itself. So as always, I just like to give a brief cliff notes or like a brief summary on the real life killers that the film is based on. So the Moors murders is one of the UK's most notorious and heinous cases, where between 1963 and 65, in and around the Manchester area, 5 children between the ages of 10 and 17 were killed by couple Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Hindley would assist in the abductions, and Brady would take the children down the Saddleworth Moor, torture, sexually abuse, and murder, and then bury them. They also took photos and audio recordings of their crimes, which were found during a search after their arrest. Brady attempted to bring Myra's brother-in-law, David Smith, into his world of murder, but after killing the last victim, 17-year-old Edward Evans, Smith turned them both over to the police. Brady always had aspirations for the, quote, perfect crime, even fantasizing about the ultimate bank robbery. Brady and Hindley were both found guilty after a 2-week trial of the three murders that they were tried for in 1966. It wasn't until Myra's confession in 1987 that the other 2 murders were finally linked to them. All the bodies were buried on the moor, but the body of Keith Bennett has never been found. Hindley died in prison in 2002. Brady was diagnosed as schizophrenic in 1985 and placed in a mental hospital in Ashworth, where he died in 2017 at the age of 79. They are among the most notorious killers, not just in Britain, but also in the, quote, killer couples category. And so now we get into the film itself. Excuse me. Of course, we get opening text. Some scenes have been created for the purposes of dramatization, but what follows is based on extensive research. Again, apparently, whoever wrote or whoever was in charge of researching this spent 2 years just heavily researching the story itself, and this film does show. Quote, between 1963 and 65, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley murdered at least 5 young people. They buried 4 of them on the moors outside Manchester. True. Which, I thought all of them were buried on the moors. Maybe it just says 4 because Keith Bennett was never found. I put although 1 has never been found. We open up in 1964 in Gorton, Manchester, which shows the 2 of them working together, which is true. I know she was a typist. I want to say he was some sort of superior. I don't quite remember. Myra has a sister named Maureen and a brother-in-law named David Smith. True. Ian has a private darkroom in his upstairs bathroom. True. I thought that was going to have a bigger role in it, but not really. But he did have a darkroom in the upstairs bathroom of their apartment house. Inspector Mounsey meets with Mrs. Kilbride to tell her no news on John, which John Kilbride was victim number 2. He was 12 years old. They say he was well, they don't say it here, but abducted from a supermarket in Ashton. What happened was they offered him a ride, and he was then assaulted and strangled with a shoelace. Joe Mounsey was the lead detective's name. However, the mother explains to him that John was last seen at the Ashton Market. True. And the photo shown is the real John Kilbride. Says he went missing November 23rd of 63, which is also true. Now, even though Mounsey was the name of the lead detective on the case, I wonder if he's also based on Detective Chief Superintendent Arthur Benfield, the head of the team that arrested Hindley and Brady, and Detective Chief Superintendent Ian Fairley, who was the actual arresting officer. I'm guessing because some of the other guys that we see like doing interrogating and him sort of answering to, I don't think we hear their names, but I'm I'm guessing Mountsy is a sort of a composite character of all these different people. I could be wrong, but Maureen and David's first daughter Angela dies. True, they called it cot death. She died in April of '65. January 1965, Mountsy informed of 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey from Ancott's going missing over Christmas, never returned from affair. True, her name was Leslie Ann Downey. It was over Christmas. Technically, it was December 26th. She did go to a fairground, never returned. She was picked up from that fairground. This was one of the times where they used the ruse of, they drop groceries. Myra would ask for help. She would help her. Only Hindley and Brady both claimed that the other one killed her. She was strangled and buried naked with her clothes at her feet, and her stepfather was a suspect. Which I think all the fathers and stepfathers were a suspect at one point or another. There was one, which I'll get to, that I think was more of a suspect than some of the other ones. Lead investigator from Manchester comes in saying that Keith Bennett has gone missing. He went to visit his grandmother in Logside the previous June, and he never made it back. True. He was the second victim. Went missing June 16th of '64, 12 years old, on the way to his grandmother's at Logside. Hindley had asked him to help load some boxes into her vehicle. Brady hid in the back. Then they drove down to the Saddleworth Moor. Brady took him to help find a lost glove. That was another ruse that they used to help find Myra's lost glove. Brought him down into the moor. And he came back alone after about 20-30 minutes. Told Hindley that he assaulted him and strangled him with a string. His remains were never found. Keith's stepfather, Jimmy Johnson, was a suspect, and this is the stepfather I think was more of a suspect than a number of other ones. He was questioned at least 4 times. He even had floorboards broken in his house, and backyard dug up, even concrete broken, because they were sure that he did it. Mountsy realizes all the missing children could be linked. He looks at the map, he sees it forms a triangle, and that the killer must live in the middle, which is Gorton, which is where they did live. And they remember a girl from Gorton went missing, and she's mentioned. Paula Reed, who went missing July '63. She was 16. True. She went missing July 12th, '63. She was the first victim. She was offered a lift from Hindley, agreed to help find a missing glove. Brady showed up on a motorcycle, went down with her to the moor, came back alone. Pretty much the same case. Brought Hindley back to her body, and she was nearly decapitated. They gave conflicting statements on Hindley's involvement. Brady even saying she wasn't present for the murder, but was for the sexual assault. Ian and David planned a bank robbery. There's several scenes, because pretty much throughout the first half, most of the scenes with Ian and Myra, they're usually accompanied by Dave and Maureen. And it's sort of this increasing conversation Ian's having with Dave about pulling off the perfect bank robbery. And can you do it? Are you up for it? Which did happen. I mean, they did talk about bank robberies quite a bit. Even at one point, it shows them when they're down at the moor, Ian takes out his pistol and has Dave practice shooting on an old oil drum, which is right next to a body that they buried. I have read that was a scenario that happened. One of the many times they talked about a bank robbery together. But he did feel that Smith would crack under pressure, so he felt he had to initiate him or see what he's made of. The film does show this, as it shows that practicing shooting at an old oil drum. Ian tells David that he's killed and that he's killed teens. David doesn't believe him. I have read that he told him, I've killed 3 or 4 and buried them at the moors, and you've even stood on their graves. Dave thought he was bullshitting. October 6th of 65, Myra goes to get Dave and bring him to their house. Which, leading up to this, we see that Dave and Maureen is now pregnant again, which she was at this time. They see that they're going to be evicted. They need money. So Dave goes to Ian and Myra for help. And they say, oh, we're going to find a businessman. We're going to get your money. So then this scene, it says October 6th of 65. Myra goes to get Dave and bring him to their house. Dave thinking they've abducted someone to give him money for his rent, but also for Brady to prove to him that he is a killer, and to see how Smith would react. David waits outside. Myra gives the flashing light signal. David goes in. It cuts. He goes back home. They lived about 300 yards apart. He's covered in blood. Goes to the bathroom to puke, and tells Maureen that Ian has killed someone with an axe. This is the scene where we get glimpses of the murder. As he's explaining it, we get these flashbacks with like this red light and just seeing Ian up close with his hair messed up, just this evil look as he's axing this kid. Myra standing there smiling, David looking shocked, and just that red light really just adding atmosphere to it. At first I thought it was the red light from the dark room, but she hits a switch and a regular light comes on. But pretty much this whole sequence plays out exactly how it happened. David shocked and Myra smiling. But yeah, Brady did approach 17-year-old Edward Evans, who was gay, lured him back to his house. Evans thought it was going to be sort of a consensual gay outing. He was an apprentice engineer, which the film does show. The rest played out pretty much the same. According to Brady, Smith, and Hindley, Myra went next door to get Dave. They went over. She said, I'll give you the signal. She flashed the light. He went in, and that was when he saw Evans on the floor, Brady standing next to him, and Myra next to him. Now, they did give conflicting stories. Like, Brady said that Dave got in on the murder, even kicking Evans as he axed him, saying Hindley was never even in the room, even though she was. It does even show Ian saying that's the messiest one yet, which, according to Smith, that is what he said afterwards. We also see Myra's grandmother calling downstairs and her having to call back up to her, which I've read also happened. While this is going on, it shows Maureen in bed and the clock showing time passing, which it shows about 3 hours passing, which was about the time it took for them to clean up the living room after the murder. And they also mentioned how the idea was the next day, Dave was to bring the pram, which I guess is like a stroller, of his baby that's now dead. He was going to bring that over the following day so that they could wheel the body into the car and take it to the morgue. They do mention that as well. So again, lots of detail. The only thing I would say that's different from what I've read is that when he came home, he didn't go straight to the bathroom to puke. He either asked for tea or Maureen made him tea, and then that's when he started explaining and then started puking. But so then it says Hyde Police Station. The following day, David and Maureen go to the police to report the murder. Somewhat true. They waited till sunrise, and then they armed themselves, I think, with a kitchen knife and a screwdriver, and they ran to a police box. They called the police. Police picked him up there, then brought them to the station. Here, it makes it look like they ran all the way to the station, but again, small. I'm sure some people will say it's a garbage film because they ran instead of getting picked up. They still went to the police the next day. This is when they mentioned that, because there's a flashback to when he looks at Evan's wallet and sees that he was an apprentice. Ian is arrested. It didn't show it yet, but they did go to the house, look around, and find the body in the bedroom. Myra was allowed to leave as she wasn't initially arrested. A detective finds a journal from the search of their house and finds pages with a bunch of actors' names and finds the name John Kilbride. True. Maureen is chastised by her mother for sticking with Dave and doubting Myra. True. Their mother always doted on Myra so much, and her family hated Dave because he was kind of a troublemaker. Not that Ian was much better, but yeah, they didn't like Dave. And that's the end of part 1. So, part 2, David and Myra are released. Search continues at Ian and Myra's house. Myra brought in for questioning. She was arrested on October 11th. Again, they went to the police on October 7th. Brady was arrested on the 9th, I believe. So now we're on the 11th. Also, Smith mentions to police a suitcase of incriminating evidence, including books, saying that he was told to put a bunch of stuff into a suitcase that was incriminating, including dodgy books, which Ian Brady was known to have books like Mein Kampf, Crime and Punishment, and he would kind of write his own stuff in them, but he also kept journals. But Dave doesn't know where the suitcase is. He doesn't know where Ian brought it. So that's what they're looking for, because it has this, quote, incriminating evidence. Dave and Maureen are brought to the moors to jog their memory of something Ian might have said or done, or if anything looks familiar. True. They either recreated or used the November 63 photograph of Myra kneeling over John Kilbride's grave. True. Again, well, actually, I don't, where all the names, the photos of victims are actual photos, I couldn't tell if this was Maxine Peake and they recreated the photo, or if it was the actual one. I went to go look on Google, and I couldn't find any comparisons. I could just find the real one, but the suitcase found with journals, reels of recordings, and photographs. True. It does. It doesn't come out and say it. Actually, no, it doesn't show it either. But it was found at Manchester Central train station. Ian Brady had a thing for railroads and stations, so it was found in the leftover luggage area of that station. A picture of Leslie Ann Down is found, as the film shows, as well as the 16-minute recording of Leslie Ann Downey's torture. I know I just said Downs. But yes, the photos of her were pornographic, and it just, the way it shows the reactions of everyone looking at it is enough. Even the scene when it shows that they're listening to the recording, and the one female investigator that's been with Mountsy the whole film, it shows her unable to continue crying and walking out of the room. That is plenty effective. At least I thought. David brought back in as his journal was found in the suitcase. I don't remember if that was something that happened. If it's in their research, I'm guessing. He was a suspect and put on trial along with Brady and Hindley. They mentioned a 13-year-old girl says she was a friend of Brady and Hindley and would accompany them on trips to the moors. This conversation doesn't go anywhere. They don't interview any 13-year-old, but I figured it might be based on Patricia Hodges, who I think was actually 12 at the time. They were going door to door asking people about Brady and Hindley, and it was upon that they came to know of this Patricia Hodges, and they did question her. A body is found by a bone sort of sticking out of the ground and identified as Downey. True. Of course, we don't see it. They just say, there's something bony sticking out of the ground. And then the next scene, we see that everyone's there. They got the tents set up. And that is true. It was the first body found. It was Leslie Ann Downey. She was found October 16th. It was her arm bone that was kind of sticking out of the ground. And it was then that they were charged with Downey along with Evans. They were already charged with Evans. And it was just as everyone was getting ready to pack up for the day when someone said, hey, I found something over here. John Kilbride's grave found. The shoe was brought to his parents to ID. His body was found October 21st, and his clothes were buried either next to him or at his feet. His mother did have to identify him through his clothes because he was so decomposed. I don't know if it played out like this or if she went down to the station, if it was a shoe or what. But that's how it plays out. It also shows that they were able to find him by looking at that photo of Myra kneeling over the gravesite, trying to match it up specifically, and then dig there, which that is how they found him. Also, Mountsey tells Hindley that her dog was killed from anesthesia while taking dental x-rays, which is true. They wanted to see exactly how old the dog was to see if that picture was taken before or after Kilbride was buried there, and the dog Puppet was killed by the anesthesia. So that's true. So then we see Chester Assizes, which I think is the name of the courthouse. April 19th, 66, the trial begins. True date and place. Judge Fenton Atkinson is the real name of the judge. People attacking the van as it pulled in, which I don't doubt is true. They even had like a bulletproof glass or plexiglass box to sit in for their safety. The film doesn't show that, but any case where the serial killers of kids, I mean, Chikatilo went through the same thing, except he was put in a cage. So I don't doubt people attacked the van. It doesn't show them in their bulletproof box. Maureen testifies and gets a nosebleed for pregnancy. I don't know if that's true. Or Nellie Hindley, their mother, lying while being questioned. I don't remember reading about that. Maybe. I wouldn't doubt it. I believe she would lie for Myra. Leslie Ann Downey's parents show up at the Smiths and attack David. I don't know if it was them specifically. I know at one point they were attacked in the elevator of their building, and David was attacked a lot in public. Even fighting off an attacker with a knife at one point and getting jailed for 3 years. That was in 1969. Myra also questioned and denies all involvement. True. May 16th of 66, the verdict is reached. Both found guilty. Brady was found guilty of Evans, Downey, and Kilbride, which was all three he was tried for. Hindley found guilty of Downey and Evans, also an accessory to Kilbride, which is true. I read it as harboring knowledge of Kilbride, but essentially it's all the same thing. Correct date, and it says that the jury deliberated for 2 hours, 23 minutes. I don't know the exact minutes, but I have read it was a little over 2 hours. Dave expresses how he'll be known as the third Moores murderer, and the public is still out to get him. True, that followed him pretty much his whole life, at least up until he moved to Ireland. Mountsey says only Manchester PD can look for Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett, and they're not going to. I don't know if that was true. I know that searching essentially stopped until the case was reopened in 85. David Maureen's baby is born. He would go to have 3 more sons with Maureen. It shows some of the aftermath, like being spat on by people. Hindley bitch painted on their front door, which is all true. And then we jump to 5 years later, when Nellie Hindley visits Maureen. Around this time, she did try to repair her relationship with her mother. She tells her that her kids were taunted at school, spat on, they had bricks thrown through their windows, they got death threats. That's all true. She ended up putting her children in foster care after Dave went to jail for that fight. True. Uh, you know, she found herself unfit, or she was found unfit as a single mother, so they were put into foster care. Um, so true, she mentions he's now out of jail and has the kids, which he did receive custody, but he went to jail for 3 years. So I think that would put him in jail between 69 and 72, and this says 71. So maybe the years are just a little bit off. Shows her meeting with Dave and the three sons, hints that they may get back together. After he got out of jail, he moved in with a 15-year-old named Mary Faherty, who became his second wife. They had another daughter, his second wife up until his death. And Maureen divorced him in 73 and married a guy named Bill Scott. So I don't know if at any point after he went to jail or came out they tried to rekindle, but Maureen goes to visit Myra. She did do this fairly regularly along with her daughter, with Bill Scott, and her mother. And we see Myra saying that she wants no more contact with Ian, wants to get rid of every evidence she has of him, including photos, and that she feels complete remorse. It feels bad for everything. Enough so that Maureen believes that Myra is changed or rehabilitated and that it was all Brady's influence. At least that was believed by Maureen. I didn't read anything about Myra really showing any remorse up until the 80s, but... And so then we get end text. Maureen died in 1980 of a brain hemorrhage. She was 34. True. David Smith raised his three sons with his second wife, Mary. They also have a daughter. True. Ian Brady remains in indefinite detention in Ashworth Mental Hospital, which, at the time of the film, true, but he did die in 2017. Actually, David Smith died in 2012 of cancer. But yeah, in 1985, he was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic and sent to Ashworth, which is where he died. I believe he holds the record, at least in Britain, for longest incarceration, where he served 51 years. I could be wrong on that. Myra Hindley died in jail in 2002 after 36 years in jail. True. Hindley and Brady eventually admitted to the murders of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett in 1987. Pauline's body was recovered from the Saddleworth Moor, and the body of Keith Bennett was never found. True. And then we just get pictures with names and dates of all 5 victims come up on the screen. And that is the film See No Evil. I thought this was very well made. It's very informative. Again, mostly a procedural. It does do a good job at showing the aftermath. A lot of times these serial killer films will just end with either their death, execution, or their trial and just say what happens. But here it shows the aftermath of what happens with someone who's directly related to these horrific killers. It shows sort of the mindset of the community after they were sentenced. Does kind of pose the question, was Myra under Brady's influence, or did she come out of it when she was in jail? But it does it in such a way that doesn't victimize her or sympathize with her, which I thought was smart. You can definitely tell a lot of research went into this. A lot of attention to small details. A lot of stuff they added. Like the fact her dog was killed, or they found John Kilbride by trying to match up the scenery with the photograph. And yeah, I mean, if it's going to be supported by the victims' families, you would hope it's going to be accurate and well made. And it's both. Especially, and I will say, Michael McNulty as Dave Smith and Joanne Fraga as Maureen Smith, they did a really good job as the leads, I guess. You do feel bad for Dave, even if he's not the best person. being known as a child murderer when you're not isn't good for anybody. But Maxine Peake and Sean Harris as Hindley and Brady, they have haunting performances. I mean, every time Sean Harris speaks as Brady, you can just hear the evil. You see the evil in his eyes. Maxine Peake is just so good at just having this dead stare and just this evil grin that she'll have. They were excellent as Brady and Hindley. So yeah, very solid film. Another great made-for-TV movie about real-life serial killers. More so about the detective procedural, but I still thought it was very good. And, great scenery with the moors, great atmosphere. And, definitely tells the story as is. So, very accurate. The research did not go to waste. I wish all serial killer movies could at least have this amount of research put into it. This or ones like In a Man's World, which also had extensive research. But hopefully when I go to do Appropriate Adult and This Is Personal, at least half of the research that went into this went into those. But yeah, I really enjoyed See No Evil. Very well made film. So I do have a few more serial killer films coming. I have a few more planned. I'll try to do at least 1 or 2 Christmas horror movies. I'm just really into this as of now. But not sure what order they'll be in. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.